Good afternoon, Phil.
Matt, good to see you. I wish it was under different circumstances. I wish we were getting ready to play a postseason game, but we are what we were. And now we move forward and say, record 0-0, let's get better.
That's great. Your season ended a week ago today, and for two of your players, it was the last game of their college basketball career, being Chris Wilson and Evan Mashmeyer. Both of them four-year players here. Chris, a co-captain this year. Can you speak a little bit about their 4 years on Hawk Hill and like kind of the legacy or the what they've left behind them?
That's a really great question. We met in the hotel when we went back from the Barclays last week, and obviously very disappointed and just that feeling of emptiness. I'll just say I've done this 20 years. I did college, high school for 7 years. The hardest day for me was the day after the last game, because I had this sense that, you know what, one more day. Give me one more day to practice, and we can straighten some things out. And the way I approached it was I spoke to the team. I thanked everybody for their efforts, and then I spoke directly to Chris and Evan, and this is exactly what I said. First of all, they're both going to graduate in May. I think that's very, very significant that they're continuing along the path that Darius and Ron and Halil, they're now college graduates. They went to 3 postseasons. They have championship rings. They had the net. They had the euphoria. And now they had a life lesson that's it. And you got to pick yourself up. You got to, when the moment becomes right, put your chest out, get your head up and say, I represented my family in the right way, which both of those young men did, and there was more. I wanted more. I'm sure that Evan would have wanted to start and score a lot of points, but at the end of the day, if you judge somebody on how they practiced and the character that they brought and the attention to detail that they put into what they were doing, then success. And in Chris's case, obviously this year wasn't what he would have wanted it to be. But again, graduate, champion, postseason, and now you had to show that you were a man and say, yeah, it didn't go the way that I had kind of mapped out in my mind. But Chris really, really embraced the idea of being a captain. So as much as we all worried about him and his game and when was it going to come around and things like that, he worried a lot about that, but he never let that get in the way of him saying a word to James Demery or grabbing Shavar or on the bench engaging with those guys, even when maybe his game wasn't going in a positive direction. So guys studied that, and players look at each other in a respectful way when you handle adversity and when you handle success.
Okay. So for those two, this was the end of their St. Joe's Road. You have a lot of guys coming back next year, and while the season ended a week ago, I'm sure the things kind of, life moves on and stuff goes quickly. So for the players that are back next year, what's the next step? Is there some sort of like a postseason meeting that you have with them? Do you set forth expectations for them heading into the off season? Like, where does this go for guys like DeAndre and James and everybody else?
Well, we started right away on Monday. I think that having them come to Hagen every day, knowing that they're going to see coaches who aren't on the road recruiting, I think it helps them academically.
Okay.
I think it helps them socially. It helps them keep their day together, and it's not idle time. And you could be idle and say, woe is me. You know, whatever it would be. Everybody's statistical line, even DeAndre's statistical line, you might say, woe is me, and I don't know if this could get better. And I don't want that. I want everybody to be together. So every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're here. We want to get...
And this has already started.
We've already started. We want to get physically stronger, but we also want to get quicker.
Okay.
And we also want to get in better condition, because when I look at these teams, you know, that Dayton could play with 6.5 guys, that VCU could keep that pace up over 4 games in 4 days. I study all of those kind of things, and I want a stronger team. I want a quicker team. I want a quicker reacting team.
Okay.
And that's what we're working on now. So we're not out there long, but we're out there, and we have to make shots.
Okay.
But we can't just say make shots. We now have a shot academy where we're breaking down everybody's shot. We want
you
them,
do that on an individual
right.
basis.
Everything now is individual.
Okay.
In the next week, Matt, we're going to meet with every player and say, what do you want out of these next 6 weeks? This is a longer period of time than we want, but we have 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
What do we want to get done? Then we catch our breath. We have 8 weeks in the summer. What do we want to get done? What do we want to see next August? What's going to give us all this boost, and just not leave it on the 3 young kids coming in, Chris Clover and Checo and Fresh, but Papa now. We got to get an answer on Papa now. We have to get an answer on Markel Lodge. Then you have 5 guys.
Correct.
On top of the 6 who played significant minutes this year. Now you're all of a sudden you're saying, boy, we haven't had that in a long time. If I'm a fan, we haven't had that. We haven't had 11 guys. How are we going to play that? What's the style going to be? But this group was easy to deal with because every day they came and they practiced to the best of their ability. It wasn't good enough.
Right.
So now we have to get better.
Okay. So the one player that you've spoken, everybody has spoken about this year, was DeAndre, and the season that he put together. Lofty expectations going into the year. I know many, when you look at a sophomore first team All A-10 and you go, wow, that's a lot of pressure on a guy. Finishing the season first team All A-10, and as you've said and others, really put himself in the conversation for player of the year in the conference. Could you talk a little bit about what the season was like for him? Such a big difference from last year, kind of being able to sit back a little bit, to this year being the main guy, and just what it was like for him. You have like the heavy is the head that wears a crown. It was on him this year, and just kind of what this season was like for him in terms of a toll, but in terms of a learning experience as well.
Well, he's an extraordinary young guy, really. Very private, quiet to a certain extent, wonderful teammate. And I think that one of the things that we don't give him enough credit for is his basketball IQ. He's very, very intuitive. He sees a bigger picture. And I think last summer he realized that, you know what, a lot is going to be asked of me. I think when his teammates voted him captain, he took that mantle on. And in the beginning of the year, and we could pick a mark, I have it on my desk, where it was too much. And everything was going in speeds that he wasn't comfortable. You know, the 2 plays that jump out to me that I showed him in this very room were a lob against Villanova, where it was a sideline out of bounds, where they're not even looking for that, and they got it. And then the sideline out of bounds play where he went up and down the sideline. Like, it just was, everything was racing. Once he settled in, and that middle period, that 20-game period, that was as extraordinary a season as I've had under my watch. Pat Carroll's senior year and Jameer's junior year, for individual, not the great teams, but those individuals. And literally he carried us a long way. Disappointments, sure. Turnovers were disappointing. Foul shooting was disappointing. And we could never get the train stopped to give him a break.
Okay.
The back end of the year, Matt, we stopped practicing with him on Mondays. Okay. He would come, he would go through the film, maybe the walkthrough, but nothing on his legs, trying to get him rested. At the same time, I then turned over the best offensive player on the other team to him. He didn't do that for 4/5 of the season. The back end of the season, we tried that. He and I have had a conversation. Did he wear down at the end of the year? I said, even wearing down at Rhode Island, 21-6-6, and everybody would say, well, he looked tired. I'm going to study it. I've broken down his season into increments. I'm not an analytics kind of guy, but I want to look at what did he do the first 4 minutes of the second half? What did he do the last 4 minutes of a game? And the responsibility for DeAndre is to now move into the discussion as an All-American, to move into the discussion as an NBA draft pick, and the responsibility for me is to do. I feel like I felt when Jameer was coming back, and I challenged myself to do better, and everybody around us to do better. Let's do strength and conditioning better. This kid deserves it. Our fans deserve it, and that's what we're going to get. He had an extraordinary year. The only reason he wasn't Atlantic 10 Player of the Year was because of our team record. I fear that when the Big Five awards come out, he's going to be first team All Big Five, but if he's not the Philadelphia Player of the Year, it's going to be because of our record. Okay. And to show his maturity, he's okay with that. His mother's okay with that. I got to bite my tongue because to the victor goes the spoils.
Right, exactly. So you had two freshmen this year that played pretty significant minutes, one that started the majority of the year and another that came off the bench for you and played a lot in Shavar and in James. Both their seasons had some ups and downs. Both showed some really, really good attributes. Both showed things that they needed to work on. What do you do with them? Obviously, you get them coming into their freshman year. You recruit them. You watch them there. Then in the fall, you see where their games are, see what you have to work with. What's that step? People always talk, media people, coaches, everybody, about a jump between freshman year and sophomore year. Now that they have that year behind them, what do you think that jump, or what do you want to see that jump look like? And I guess more importantly, what do they want to see that jump look like? In particular, Shavar and James, given that they played.
Well, those two guys had significant experience. My concern is that the experiences were 18-time losses, and really, if you look at those 18 games, and we could work this out, and maybe 6 of the games we didn't have a lead in the second half. So 12 times we had the lead in the second half. What happened with closing? What happened with identifying a big stop or a big basket? Both guys clearly, their shooting has to change, has to improve, and they are already in the what we're calling the academy, and we're breaking it down like you would at a camp. And did we know that? No, I didn't see their shooting strokes being that far off. Now, the numbers are the numbers, so we have to improve their shooting stroke. We have to, in a way, slow their world down. Both guys in conversation will say to me, I feel like I leave my room at 8 o'clock in the morning and I don't get back to my room till 10 o'clock at night. And whether it be the academic challenges, the social challenges of being in this setting, but we have to not just wish that the jump from freshman year to sophomore year occurs. We have to make it happen. And we're going to have to rely on them being really gym rats. And that's going to be seen over time, maybe not even in this spring, but now in the summer when they have a lot more free time, taking one class, you have all day, classes at night. So what are you going to do with your time, and how is that going to be laid out? I want both of those guys, though, to get a quicker reaction time, And I know athletically they both have that, and I think this year, they spent a lot of the year praying that they didn't make a mistake. And you can't play like that. You have to play where you're breathing and you're relaxing. And basketball skills, I'm with our fans. I get everybody. I get it. They have to improve it as shooters, because you're going to end up having a career like Garrett Williamson. Garrett Williamson was a magnificent player. He was a winner. He was a competitor. But if the ball doesn't go in the basket, you can't look like a player.
Right. You're a good defender with limitations elsewhere. So this year, Isaiah Miles made a big jump in productivity from his sophomore year to his junior year. You got overall a pretty productive season from Aaron Brown. From the 5, you didn't get as much productivity as I'm guessing you and others, when you look at the team, were maybe thinking. Next year's very different in the fact, as you mentioned earlier, you could theoretically be adding one freshman. You could be adding 2 guys that sat out this year, possibly. That gives you a really crowded front court next year. What would need to happen for a player like Jai Williams, who got spot minutes this year, did some good things in those spot minutes? What needs to happen for someone like him or someone like Obi Romeo to see an increase in their role next year? What kind of thing would you tell, specifically, I guess, either Jai or Obi, this is what I need to see next year for you to
and even Javon, in a way, Matt,
Yeah, he wasn't on the court all the time. He went small a lot.
There's a certain pace, and the pace is not just the 40 minutes, 30 times that the fans see. The pace is in practice, and all three guys, we have to do a lot of work.
Okay.
We have to do a lot of work with their basketball IQ, because we want to play a certain way. We wanted to press this year, but when it got back to playing a 7-man rotation and one guy playing 40 minutes, that was going to be difficult to pull off. So in all three cases, you make a really good point. Like, those three guys, we've got to get a player out of there.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to get a productive player out of the minutes that they are playing. So there are things that we're going to do with them that have nothing to do with shooting a jump hook.
Okay.
But it has to do with running the floor, catching the ball, proper screening, offensive rebounding, lateral movement defensively. The one thing that I look at and say, you know what, we actually became a decent zone team.
Mm-hmm.
Is going forward, is that the way that we're going to have to play? Because maybe you're going to play 2 forwards as opposed to 1 big guy.
Okay.
But I would say the biggest thing for all 3 guys is basketball IQ.
And that'll be across the board. That'll be with Javon as well as the other
Javon,
two? Okay.
Jai, and Obi. Basketball IQ and pace. Can they think quick enough to play at a pace that's the top end of the Atlantic 10? This year, that didn't happen. But freshman, no minutes until he was a sophomore, Javon. So, drive. Not grind at them, but we're going to drive them to think quicker, move quicker, play quicker.
Okay. And then the final question I have kind of takes a little bit of a turn from the current team, and it's not specifically about recruits, but about recruiting. You mentioned earlier how your season is over, you have the guys back, you're doing things, but at the same time, for you and the assistant coaches, it jumps right into recruiting. Something that's gotten a lot of national discussion and both ways of late is the topic of negative recruiting and how you're going to have coaches, and some schools are notorious for this and others are notorious for not. And my question for you is, being out there on a daily basis and recruiting against other schools, not what schools are doing it, but like, how do you combat that when you're going up against another school, and for whatever reason it may be St. Joe's is in the city, St. Joe's is this, St. Joe's is that. How do you approach that, and how prevalent is it? Like, is that something that you do see? Or is it more of a media creation?
No. I think that coaches have a way of making a comment, but they might not, in their own mind, say, well, that was negative towards that school.
Okay.
I think it's less prevalent today than it was when I started.
Oh, you do? Okay.
But I will say this. With the social media and the kids read everything, and anybody that thinks that they don't read, they read everything. Coaches will pull a thread on that.
Okay.
They'll pull a thread and they'll say, "Hey, did you see what this writer said? Did you see what this fan said? Did you know that the attendance at one of their games was 1,000 people?"
So they may not be saying, "I'm saying this," but saying this is what other people are saying.
Did you see it? And I think that there's a lot of fan interaction now in recruiting. I think there's
a lot.
I think they tweet with these kids. They blow smoke at the kids. So my thing on that whole picture is, if somebody has to talk about another school, if we were ever reduced to talking about another school, my response to a family, to a kid would be, so they mustn't have enough to offer you. They mustn't have that opportunity. And it's subtle in a lot of ways. There's a big kid in Philadelphia who went to another Big 5 school who you would get feedback that say, he was always asking about the guys on our roster. So let's say that this big kid in Philadelphia was asking me about Obi Romeo. Well, I knew what Obi was back then.
Right.
But how did the kid know Obi's
wondering where
name?
that information is coming.
Where would that name come from? And you know, roster management or you know, a tweet that said, I heard that this went on, or whatever it would be. My thing has always been, Matt, come touch it, feel it, and get a sense for yourself.
The point being, if you're confident enough selling your own program, that you don't have to be going
right.
out
And
there and saying,
to a kid, if that's going to sway you, then who are they talking about the next year? And it could be you. It could be you as the player, where they don't. He's not really. These guys on our team are my guys, and I have their back. I'm always going to tell you the truth, but I have their back. And if somebody said, well, am I going to play ahead of that guy? Well, I didn't promise him anything. You want to come? You want to compete? Then here's what we think you can get. I think that's recruiting at our level.
Okay.
You know, if you said to me, what's it like for the Villanovas and the Virginias and the Oklahoma States of the world? I don't know.
Right.
I don't really.
But at like more of the Atlantic 10 and that level, that's
you
kind
have
of
a
what
good
you
feel, see. And one of the things, Matt, I think that sometimes people miss is the Atlantic 10 is really an honorable league because the head coaches are in charge. So the assistant coaches aren't running off as renegades. They're not. They're not allowed to kind of create their own agenda. And now you got to get reeled in and say, well, whoa, wait a second. You know, call coach at school B in the league and say, wait a second, your assistant coach has left the reservation here. And so I've always appreciated that, and I always bring that up at the coaches meeting in the spring. That, you know what, it's important that the assistant coaches in our league do honor to the business.
You don't have like a hired gunner that comes into a school, which you may have in some other conferences. Like your job specifically is to do this.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for answering. That was a good response.
Not a problem.
All right. So this was Matt Gifford with St. Joe's head coach Phil Martelli for Hawks All Access. Until next time, thanks.